waterfall.
Oh, wow.
Going to a waterfall today.
That girl is a real crowd pleaser, hey. Clap your hands 3 times.
I'm gonna do that part.
Huh? Some campsites. Oh, can't read. Starting to think might be a waterfall. The bridge, the stairs, the bridge, or Okay, so there was a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, and then afterwards, when we checked the news, we saw that there was also a major tsunami warning. We're fine. I'm recording this a couple of days later. Both fine. The problem was that on the news, makeshift Japanese lesson here, everything said big tsunami warning, like Ot Tsunami Keiho. O means big. The city that we live in is Otsu. Ot Tsunami, Otsu, they sound the same. On top of that, they're also written with the same characters, the same kanji. There are thousands, so I was not factoring in coincidence. Completely lost my shit at this point because the entire apartment just shook, and then turn on the news and it's like, it's hitting your city directly, evacuate. And so, yeah, did not have a good day. So there were maybe 5 or so earthquakes during the rest of the day, but they were way smaller, just like aftershocks. And so at some point we decided to leave to get water and food and whatever. And when we came back, we kind of just had to wait things out to see if the warning would be lifted, if we had to evacuate here. And during all of that, I just sat down and read so that I would think as little as possible. And because of that, I finished a lot of the books that I came here with, one that I just picked up, and now I have 5 or so books to talk about. So today, many days later, it's like a rainy, gloomy day. Didn't really feel like going out. And so here are some of the books I finished. 2 different Murakamis, In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami and After Dark by Haruki Murakami, that felt kind of like companion pieces in some ways, not just like namesake-wise, but the opening of both books take place in like a love hotel, like a red light district, and involve blood, and kind of like spiral in separate ways from there. Okay, so I'll just talk about what the book is about because I just kept rambling for some reason. Okay, so plot-wise, not super interesting, but form-wise, and the way that the story is presented, I found really engaging and also kind of left field, especially in terms of Murakami's catalog. It reminded me of that one other book that's kind of out there, Hard-Boiled Wonderland at the End of the World, I think it's called. Kind of like sci-fi fantasy one, which is like an outlier in his, the books that he's written. This also feels like an outlier, which is probably why I was able to enjoy it so much, because it is really refreshing, especially if you've read, 10 plus of his books and are very familiar with like his tropes, his themes, his formulas. This, defies convention in a lot of ways. I wouldn't go so far as to say the book itself is like experimental, but okay, the book is about, it all takes place over the course of one night. It's like 6 hours from midnight to like 6 a.m. after dark. It takes place in Japan. There's like a cast of characters that you're introduced to, and you as an observer are also kind of a character. You're referred to as the camera or the point of view, and the book definitely makes an emphasis on having it feel cinematic. When I think of certain scenes of the book, they are super visual, like you can imagine the tone, the setting, the place, the song that's playing, and having these like jumps of like white space also being like jumps of like visual just worked really well for me in terms of being able to imagine it, and also it leaning into this sort of like, cinematic style it's going for. There's certain parts where it literally will say, now the point of view like jumps to her fingers or her lips, and you see her say this, and she blinks twice, and what does it mean? You can't know. We zoom out, we go to a different room, the chapter will change, and you're on a new character. It's all super visual, it's all super kinetic. It just starts compounding on this sense of mystery and aimlessness. It's good. So the story itself is just these like 5 or 6 or so characters all spending a day doing their own thing, and seeing them kind of intersect and cross paths, but only in the background of another character's scenes. Like you kind of see how interwoven all of their stories are without any of them ever directly meeting, and when they do meet, it's a highlight, mostly because the dialogue in this is super good. The book is written in the present tense, which just gives everything a lot more emphasis on like natural momentum and the words themselves just being all that you can express. There's no like interiority, there's no third person omniscient stuff going on, so it's just straight dialogue, which also adds to like the script element. It's all super clever. Again, the dialogue is great between like the 2 leads. It's the most like natural I've ever read Murakami. Really liked it. I won't go into like spoiler specifics, blah blah blah, but this book had really good tone, like a strong sense of like style. There was substance, although guilty pleasure, I love how aimless and kind of like lilting a lot of Murakami endings are. They all kind of just culminate in someone going into a dark place and either dividing or blending into one. Someone goes in the dark, they come out, and they're like a changed, transformed person, and then you just watch them walk away and the book ends. And there's something just so nice about that, even though it is kind of like formulaic and whatever, trivial. It's something that I did miss over the 2 years that I didn't read anything by him. I think it was a good like reintroduction to him, Although I think it's also setting the bar a little too high. I think if I went straight to like another book of his that I haven't read, I'd be a little disappointed. But yeah, I'm no longer gonna like blacklist the Murakamis that I own. Although I'm also not in like a super big rush to read them. Okay, so the other Murakami that I read, In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami, worked less for me for sure. I still liked it. Like I finished the book, I was able to get through it really quickly, but just didn't have like as much of a lasting effect. And also, I don't think I'm like the intended audience. I think if me from 2 years ago read this, I would have really enjoyed it because I had been in an era where I was just super into like dark, disturbing media at large, whether it be like movies or manga. There's like some super depraved stuff that's like shock value-y in like horror, surrealism, adjacent rabbit holes. Anyways, I was getting to like some weird stuff, and that extended to books. So when I heard about Audition and In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami, I was like in that headspace of like wanting things to freak me out. Now, 2 years later, I don't think I would have read this if like I knew nothing about it and someone told me what this was about. I'd be like, oh, that's not really my thing. But through the power of the backlist and like building up this author for years now, I wanted to check it out regardless. Even though that like headspace of like being grossed out and like unnerved isn't something I'm like chasing anymore. Oh, all that to say that my complaints are about to be very subjective. So this book is about a tour guide who is like a translator for this foreigner who hires him to show him through the red light district. So you're reading from the perspective of the tour guide as he takes this foreigner dude to like all these nightclubs and like nightlife, whatever ooh la la places. And during all this, there's like a string of murders or like a murder singular that's like super sensationalized and like it's on the news. And so this tour guide starts thinking maybe this foreigner is involved because he's kind of shady. He's like lying about certain things. He's, we're watching him. So there's like a mystery element too, as they spend 3 days together, and during their, escapades, it's like something will happen. Then, tour guide dude's by himself and he's like drawing red string on the walls, connecting all these dots. And then he has to go out for shift number 2, and then, something else, blah, blah, blah. So that sort of mystery element that's kind of like moving the book forward, and it's like the main like drive, like momentum of like all the scenes, just suddenly gets like deflated really fast, and all the cards get put on the table very immediately. Like halfway-ish through the book, there's just like a super depraved, crazy, cuckoo scene, which I'll try not to spoil, but I guess implying that something happens is like a semi-spoiler. Murder happens in the book. I'll just say that. Who does it? Who knows? Anyways, once things happen and like the cards are on the table, the rest of the book just feels so like sluggish and also like really, I don't know, clunky, where the logic behind it, I feel like there was a very heavy emphasis on like, you're just gonna have to like go with this on this one. Like there's heavy suspension of disbelief in terms of like just buy into the book and it'll work out better. Don't like super scrutinize like the logistics of everything, or like the fact that this totally would not happen in real life. You gotta just go with it. But then there's like some super drawn out like explanations of like the history of like this person's backstory and like how different people are involved, and it just like stops making sense totally and like completely, and it gets weird. There's like one like double 2 steps ahead thing I can do where I'm like, the author is actually aware of like how clumsy this is, and it's like an insinuation that this person's a pathological liar because they were lying at the start. So then it's like maybe they're lying at the end too, and so you're not maybe. But anyways, that's a reach for sure. So the lilting, trailing off ending works a lot better in something where like tonally it makes sense, versus this like very logical like mystery murder thing that it's definitely trying to be a little more concrete. And so leaving without answers, or leaving on like just this random interaction feels really weird, and overall just makes things land a lot less. All that being said, the scene in question of like evil going on, yeah, that was super gross, like super depraved and nasty and horrible and god awful. The whole thing is like really like nihilistic and rotten. So if you're into that, or if that's something you're looking for, I do recommend this book because it gets the job done. This book I think I recommend kind of more like blanket statement-y, especially if you're like into an intersection of movies and books. I think like the form playing into like the movie elements worked really well for me, and I thought it was really fun and easy to get through. It also, doesn't super feel like a lot of other Murakami's. So if you've read a lot of them and you're a little bit burnt out like I was, give it a shot. I thought it was a good book. Now, away from the Murakami's, I also finished Nothing But the Night by John Williams. Had high hopes for this, and I think I was simultaneously impressed and let down. It's a skinny book, so the fact that it managed to do both in like a short amount of pages is pretty impressive on its own. I think the thing I'm taking away from this book the most is how elevated the language was without it feeling gimmicky or like overbearing. There is just so much like craft on display in terms of building up a setting and also just having just an insane vocabulary. Like, I don't know, you kind of just have to read it, I think, because plot-wise so little happens. This takes place over the course of a single day, I'm pretty sure, and it's just this person, this man who is dreading seeing his father, and that's the book. And it's just like him like cowering and like being anxious and like over racking his brain about this like interaction that they're gonna have, and you don't know like the nature of their relationship, and things obviously get explained to you as you read more. And it's just like this sense of like wandering, of lacking direction, of being overwrought and like anxious. And yeah, just the setting itself, it will take something as like banal as ordering eggs and just take it, like elevate it to a super high extreme. Like that page in particular, yeah, just transcendent. I was like, oh shit, I'm like reading a book. Like we're going crazy. We're taking these 100 pages and running. So language-wise, style-wise, it's super impressive. Plot-wise, it's a pretty pared back book, and I think the second half kind of loses steam in terms of that interaction with their father happens, and then afterwards there's just like an emotional kind of fallout where things just take a turn. It's a short book, so I'm not gonna like super get into it, but if you've read, I think you'll get what I'm insinuating. It just felt like out of place and also didn't age super well. I don't know, the whole thing just tonally it shifts a lot, and I don't know if it landed that much for me. I do know I enjoyed reading the book, and with it being this short, I think I do still recommend it, especially if you're into the author. The only thing I haven't read by him now is Augustus, which is like his, what is that called, John? Historical fiction thing. I think it's also supposed to be, oh my god, what is that word? It's like where it's written through letters, like an epigraph, etymological, something. Epistolary, there we go. Anyways, that's the only one left, and the fact that I'm gonna run out of John Williams novels to read is pretty sad, because all of his books I have liked pretty thoroughly. Even this one, which does rank at the bottom between like Stoner and Butcher's Crossing, still a pretty good book. Yeah, really good author. Another book that I'm now a little over halfway through, and I need to stop also because I have plans to buddy read this, and I don't want to just like finish the book by myself, is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am liking this book more than I thought. Initially, I was not super bought in. This is about like butlering and just this sort of like parable told by this old English butler reminiscing on his life. It takes place over, I don't know how many days total, but at least 2. This like multi-day trip that he is taking across the countryside, and as he is taking the trip in like present day, he will stop and write down, like the whole thing is kind of a letter, but he'll like, while writing or like while recounting his trip, will go off on like flashbacks and tangents about his life that's led up to this point. And so he'll talk a lot about like the kind of legacy that he and his father have built up within like the butlering industry, and the device of writing in the present about the past adds this sense of like nostalgia and wistfulness and like melancholic sort of sadness. Everything is tinged with like a hint of regret, whether it's that he can't be in this golden era again, or at his shortcomings back then that like still kind of haunt him to this day. The book definitely is building up steam, and also like the scope is expanding a lot in terms of getting a little bit more like emotional and political and historical. The beginning took a bit for me to like fully grasp like what the book was doing, or like what the book was. It's doing a lot, and I don't want to say too much because I still have a second half of the book that I'm sure it's going in interesting places, and I'm excited to finish it. But now that I'm thinking about it, I do have to stop reading this because they said I would read it with Cami, and I feel like if I finish the book, that'd be kind of BM. So anyways, those are 4 books that I'm done with. And here are 2 prospects. So because I read during the day of the earthquake, these 2 books, just like front to back together, it was like 400 pages in one sitting. I burnt up a little bit of like my literary battery, and now I want to read something skinny again. So these are the short books that I have. Okay, someone called me, sorry. The 2 books that I want to read, I'm going to do something that I don't think I've ever done, which is like the booktube cheat code. I'm going to read the blurb just because I've only read a few pages, and I am going into this relatively blind, outside of like knowing who she is, which in my last video, actually, I said that she was Yukio Tsushima's daughter, or Yukio Mishima's daughter. She's not. She is Osamu Dazai's daughter. Thank you for correcting me in the comments. Anyways, so this book, from what I know, from like the first few pages, there's a woman and she has a baby, and she has an apartment that's like an entire floor to herself, and every wall has a window and it's flooded with light. This says, "It is spring. A young woman left by her husband starts a new life in a Tokyo apartment. Territory of Light follows her over the course of a year as she struggles to bring up her 2-year-old daughter alone. Her new home is filled with light streaming through the windows, so bright that you have to squint, but she finds herself plummeting deeper into darkness, becoming unstable, untethered. As the months come and go and the seasons turn, she must confront what she has lost and what she will become." Disturbing and dreamlike, like Elena Ferrante's The Days of Abandonment. So, cool comparison there at the end. It sounds interesting. Very short book. I can do this. I will read this. I want to read this, so I will read this. And then the other short book that I want to pick up, definitely during my trip, just to see if I can replicate what happened last year when I read In Love by Alfred Hayes, same author, and I think same people, same setting, maybe. I don't know if it's like a literal trilogy or like a spiritual one, but anyways, he has 3 books that are, I think, a triptych, and this is the second one, I think, or the third. Anyways, we'll see. I know very little. All I know is that when I read the book last time, the sense of atmosphere, the tone, the like longing, the wistfulness, the melancholy, the atmosphere, even just on a purely like sentence level, there were entire pages of the book that just mesmerized, like hypnotized, just wonderized everything. And because it's so short, being like in like the perfect mood and atmosphere, being able to read the entire book and just have it like be captured in that one moment, that one setting that like you read it in, just for me worked perfectly. I read it on like a train while it was like super cold and like snowy and blah blah blah, and yeah, it just worked. So because the weather is super gloomy and cold and rainy, I'm hoping to recreate that somehow. And if not, no big deal. But yeah, just an author that I had like a super good experience with. Another one of his books. We'll see if it happens again. Okay, so those were my thoughts on the books that I read that day and what I kind of have lined up. Here's some more vlog stuff happening. I think I go to a train museum, climb another mountain. I'm not sure what else, but yeah. Bye. I have no idea what any of these are. What the hell? Make a milkshake.
Sitting next to
What the hell? I missed it. It's too fast.
Two scoops of vanilla ice cream.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all surprising.
And now you gotta get every last drop. Well, you got. Oh. Uh oh. Okay, we gotta slurp it. You record.